For this video, we're going to go into the idea of the Electoral College. Now, I've broken down on the way the system works. I've broken down basically by where these points come from and how they come about, and for the actual regions, they're broken down by congressional regions. And when we compare that out to being in comparison to the actual points, what we find out from the actual points that were given on the actual night, we find without these seven faithless electors, which if we actually take out the human element, which I will get to that later, we find out that this is actually something that we can actually look and find that this is something that is actually very simple, and we find that we see that this is basically a system that actually does render the same verdict. We still get during the night we had a verdict of Trump 306 to 232 Clinton, with nobody else receiving any electoral votes. During while we had some faithless electors giving Bernie Sanders, John Kasich, Ron Paul, each one 3 for Colin Powell and 1 for Faith Spotted Eagle. Which resulted in lower numbers of the original, Trump losing 2 and Clinton losing 5, which apparently was not exactly the result that the actors in Hollywood wanted. They wanted them to take as many away from Trump as possible so Clinton would win, and give them out to Clinton. Clinton technically won in popular vote, but we'll when we look at it, we'll show you why the popular vote is really irrelevant and why that doesn't even matter, and why because of studies, why the popular vote can actually be kind of fixed to where you can have a lot of problems with it because of voter fraud from allowing people that aren't actually allowed to vote by letting them steal people's voter registration, and allowing people that should never be allowed to vote, such as people who are just visiting here on vacation from other countries, or even people who are here legally, or even these dreamers. There have been dreamers caught illegally voting, and there's even been people caught voting multiple times. This is another issue that has come up. So this number, and there are states that have done this, that have actually refused investigations. This is why when we see this difference in the voting totals, it's not so much of an issue, and we'll actually show why that we shouldn't be as much concerned about, hey, she had this many numbers of votes. It should always be concerned about who had more electoral votes, because it's the actual number of mileage of people that you're actually getting in comparison, and it should show that this is what actually matters to the whole system. Because otherwise you could essentially just start rigging the whole system with the popular vote. That's why we're not a direct democracy. Even the term, when people try to say, we're a democracy, we're not a democracy, we're a democratic republic. This just means that people do vote, but they don't directly vote. And though we could, and this is one point that I do employ, we could create some reforms to the Electoral College, such as getting rid of these human electors and actually making it computerized, which would help. So you actually get the direct amount that you actually come in at on voting night. Number one, and number two, you would actually get. That's one. Number two is to break it down by congressional district, so it becomes an even more representative democracy. Instead of going wider, you go more narrow, and this means that each presidential candidate would have to work harder to get this. And when people are talking, we need to give third parties a chance. Well, that gives third parties the largest chance that they would ever have, is to have these regional areas, because they essentially, if they wanted to get their foot in the door in even the small regions and start building up from there, there's nothing better than to actually work from those areas. Then they can actually work on a specific region, which would make it very difficult for larger candidates to actually work in those regions. Now let's look at the actual point of the actual popular vote. This is the United States. This is Wikipedia, which is not exactly reliable for sources, but we can at least rely on them for basic things such as population. What we're going to do is we're first going to be looking at their the point of population for the cities. We're going to be looking at the top 20. Now, you might be looking at, why am I looking at the top 20? Because it would take about approximately hitting only the top 16 and about 80%, between 60 to 80% of those top 16 cities to actually win an election. And if you go about to 20 with it, you'd only need about the majority of those cities to win an election. It may be a tight election where it becomes where parties are starting to kind of hit those things. Even third parties, you go out to about 30 cities. And this would assume that what we're basically getting of the only cities that would actually matter. Now in these top 20 cities, you're going to see New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, and Phoenix in the top 5. Philadelphia, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, and San Jose round out the top 10. Austin, Jacksonville, San Francisco, Columbus, Ohio, and Fort Worth in 11 to 15. Indianapolis, Charlotte, Seattle, Denver, and Washington, D.C. make the top 20. Now, mind you, you're probably gonna say, "Hey, where's the largest city in my state?" And you're gonna find a huge problem with this. And even when you see up here in the maps, you're gonna see when it comes to these 10 largest cities is how sparse they are. This means that we see a lot in California, some out in the west with it. You see some up here in the east with it, but you're not going to see much in the southeast. And this means that basically it's kind of biased how you're going to hit these. Now we go into areas down here in the 20 to 30 range. Now this would be in the rare case that this candidate might need it. This would be more apt to be what a GOP might hit to do it because of needs for the party. This would be Boston, El Paso, Texas, Detroit, Nashville, Memphis, rounding 21 to 25, Portland, Oklahoma City, Las Vegas, Louisville, and Baltimore, rounding out 26 to 30. That's it. If you're not in those cities, you're not going to be basically represented. This means Milwaukee, this means Albuquerque, this means Tucson, this means Fresno, this means Sacramento, Mesa, Arizona. This means Kansas City, Missouri. Atlanta, Georgia. Long Beach, California. Omaha, Nebraska. Raleigh, North Carolina. Colorado Springs, Colorado. Miami, Florida. Long Beach, Virginia. Oakland, California. Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's Minnesota's largest city. Not represented at all. That means that person in Congress is pretty much going to basically be put up there, and they're going to be basically screaming at air when it comes down to the what they want to get done, because they're going to be told you don't matter. Doesn't matter if you're from the largest city. Your state doesn't matter. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Guess what? It doesn't matter. Because even though Oklahoma City is up there with the bare minimum of the top 30, they're not going to be needed on all fronts in many years. Arlington, Texas. New Orleans, Louisiana. That's the largest city in Louisiana. That means Louisiana is not even going to be represented. When it comes to them making a beef in Congress, they're basically going to be told to shut up. Wichita, Kansas, that's going to be another one. They're going to be told to shut up in Congress. Cleveland, Ohio, since they're the second largest city in Ohio, they're basically, people from that region are going to be basically kind of the one that's not going to matter as much. Tampa, Florida. Bakersfield, California. Aurora, Colorado. Anaheim, California. Honolulu, Hawaii. Hawaii's not even going to matter anymore. They're not even going to be technically even on the map to people when it comes to politics. So when they're in Congress, basically they're going to be told you don't matter. Don't even let your bill come to the table. And this is the way things are going to go when we have a popular vote. And this is what happens when you do this. When you go bigger government and popular vote, you get to this point. You get to someone telling you, don't let your bill come to the floor. We're not voting on it because your area doesn't matter. And they will judge you on that. You keep seeing this thing. St. Louis, Missouri, that's another one. And you keep Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Cincinnati, Ohio, Anchorage, Alaska. That means Alaska. They don't matter at all. Keep going down. Newark, New Jersey, Lincoln, Nebraska, Orlando, Florida, Jersey City, New Jersey. So basically, you're going to find out that these are not going to actually matter when it comes down to it. Des Moines, Iowa, and it boils down to they don't matter when it comes down to the whole. They won't matter in a popular vote when it comes down to the whole system, and that's what needs to be understood. And that's why we don't have this. And what needs to be understood is that if we want to embrace people that are in a third party, regardless if they're crackpots of socialism, or if they're crackpots like democratic socialism, which is the same thing as National Socialism, or they're communist or whatever their thing is, then we're to more reasonable things like libertarian, then we're going to have to basically create a system to where we have these areas broken down to where they can actually get in. And another point is that could be done is stop preventing ballot access. Which is something that is another thing that we could do, is stop preventing ballot access. Even for numbnuts like Evan McMuffin. Because we need ballot access for as many choices as possible, because if we're going to be a nation that needs to choose as much as possible, we definitely need people to have the idea of ballot access, because it should be as many types of freedom. And that's basically what we're talking about here, is if we want to basically do this, is we need to basically create basically we want more ballot access for these people, for all types of parties, and you want to break it down to being smaller groups. You don't want a larger group. You get a larger group, you're basically making your vote useless. Your vote doesn't count, because we're talking collectivism here. The closer to collectivism you get and statism as you get, the less you matter. You got to think with it, in your local community, you're going to find people that you see people that you know. They're going to say hi, how are you, and everything like that. When it comes to when you deal with things on the federal scale, when you have to call D.C. for something, or call the Maryland area or Virginia area for something federal, they don't know who you are. They don't care who you are. You're just a number to them, and they really could care less about you. And that's the whole point. The bigger you go, the less you matter. And this is where the whole point goes. So the smaller we can keep things, the better. And the same thing applies, and the same thing will apply with voting. And that's where we need to realize this, is the same thing will apply with voting, such as with the Electoral College. We could get rid of the human element, because the human element is a little bit destructive, because we saw that we were getting faithless electors, and people petitioning on we saw people petitioning for faithless electors from celebrities, and it just got to be awful in this last election. We had 7 faithless electors. They were petitioning for faithless electors to elect Hillary Clinton, yet it kind of backfired, as she lost 5 and Trump lost 2. So it ended up being where Trump actually technically increased his gain by 3. So it was quite humorous with that. That it ended up backfiring, because they wanted Hillary, and that was their whole point to begin with. And then we see that there were points where because you saw 3 taken away, and they went to Colin Powell out in Virginia. You see Ron Paul got 1, John Kasich got 1, Bernie Sanders got 1, and Faith Spotted Eagle got 1. She was even losing 1 to Ron Paul, which is kind of humorous that he was able to steal 1 of her votes. And when we look at this, it's just overall basically that we see that he was, the system is basically where we need more people, not less. And we can look to other countries that have actually developed this system, and it creates less controversy when it comes out to the system. And we can still elect based on the most electoral points, as we have in the past. It doesn't need to be a specific 50% plus one majority of electoral points. If we want, so we don't get like a runoff in the presidential election, to actually give more access, because I assume that that's why they're worried. So we can actually do that to establish that and create an actual winner, and have an actual plurality person win when we're judging that. And allow people from multiple parties to join in, and especially the smaller we get, the better it's going to turn out. And smaller parties that are coming in from these different states are going to be able to allow it to exist within these systems a lot easier when it comes to dealing with a small that are maybe dealing within a small congressional area, and maybe a few congressional areas. They can actually matter a lot more than trying to deal on a national scale. And I think that's something very, very important. If they're trying to deal, because a candidate from a third party cannot really handle with the financial end of a major party on a third on the end of a national thing. But if they target certain congressional areas, they could actually matter a lot and actually win some certain congressional districts, and actually win those areas that an actual president cannot get to, and actually start racking up some points. And that's something that if you change around the system to actually go with 1 point for every congressional district and 2 points at large for every state, you're going to notice that it's going to change around the way the thing works. Even though it did not change around the actual points in the election, it will when it comes down. It will when it comes down to the actual results in the future, especially being that the tactical approach of third parties will be much different. Third parties will focus on local tactics instead of a national tactic. This will allow them to start racking up small points here and there. They'll go with wide-spanning congressional districts and start trying to pop off one by one, being that they might be able to get their voice heard, and it'll that are more of a swing district, and while the other ones will actually focus on these major populated areas, and it sometimes will lead to them starting to rack up some points. And meanwhile, they might not win technically the overall points in the state. If they start doing state by state, they're going to notice that they're actually going to place very, very high, and you're going to find a lot of third parties trying to compete for these areas, and it will actually be a game changer. Might not be leading to a third party winning in a very, very close year, but in a very, very recent year, but it will change outright what actually happens. And that's what we're seeing, and that's what we could see from that, and that really mimics what some other systems could actually, some other free countries have actually done, is actually start to expand the way elections have gone. And being the way our states are structured, that would actually be the best option. Now, if you like this discussion, like it, subscribe, click the bell, share it all the way around social media. Make sure they subscribe, please, because I'm hovering around 18 subscribers right now, so I need to add something. I've seen other people tend to grab some subscribers, so please make sure to subscribe. And I will see you guys tomorrow. See everyone. Bye.